Slavery has been a grim and pervasive part of human history, affecting every society and culture, including Arabia. Though the rise of Islam brought certain rules to soften the brutalities of slavery, the ugly reality is that the practice endured in the Arab world well into the 20th century. As long as people remain enslaved, they will fight for their freedom. This was evident in the 9th century when a monumental uprising broke out in the marshlands of southern Iraq. This rebellion grew into a massive conflict that would shake the mighty Abbasid Caliphate to its core. In this video, we'll delve into the Zanj Rebellion, the largest slave revolt in Islamic history. Originally, this video was only available to our YouTube members and patrons, but thanks to their generous support, it's now available to everyone. We fund our free content through a program that provides exclusive videos to our supporters, who receive 2 documentaries per week that aren't accessible to the public. By joining them, you can watch a series covering topics like the Albigensian Crusade, Fall of Sparta, First Punic War, Italian Reunification Wars, the history of Prussia, the biography of Sulla, Russo-Japanese War, the Reconquista, the Pacific War, Persian Wars, and the War of Spanish Succession, among many others. These videos are made possible by the contributions of our backers. If you enjoy our content and want more, as well as support historical education, consider becoming a YouTube member or patron. You'll also get early access to public content, join our vibrant Discord server, and enjoy exclusive behind-the-scenes insights. Join today through the link in the description and pinned comment, and you'll have access to over 130 exclusive videos. Thank you for your support. Before we jump into the rebellion itself, let's clarify who the Zanj were. Historically, Zanj referred to East African slaves, particularly those of Bantu descent. However, it wasn't limited to a specific ethnicity, but was rather a blanket term used by Arabs and Persians for various African peoples living on the eastern coast of the continent. During the Abbasid Caliphate's golden age, thousands of these African slaves were brought to Iraq to labor under horrific conditions. They were tasked with draining swamps, cleaning salt flats, extracting salt, and cultivating crops like cotton and sugar cane on land they had reclaimed. In addition to the grueling labor, the Zanj lived in deplorable conditions, often housed in camps of 500 to 5,000 people, in small huts made of reeds and palm leaves, surrounded by disease-carrying mosquitoes in the marshlands. Their diet was sparse, consisting mainly of flour, semolina, and dates. The poor living conditions, coupled with the harsh work, fostered a strong sense of solidarity among the slaves, regardless of their ethnic or cultural backgrounds. This unity laid the foundation for future uprisings. In 689 and 694, the Zanj slaves revolted against their masters, though historical sources are scarce on these events. Still, these early uprisings demonstrated that southern Iraq was a powder keg waiting to explode. The 7th century rebellions were but a prelude to a much larger and deadlier revolt, which erupted in 869. At that time, the Abbasid Caliphate was already weakening, losing territories to rival dynasties, including the Umayyads in Iberia and the Idrisids in Morocco. Independent states were forming along the Caliphate's eastern frontiers in Persia and Central Asia, and the internal strife, such as the anarchy in Samarra and civil wars, further destabilized the empire. Meanwhile, more slaves were brought into the harsh conditions of southern Iraq, which only heightened their dissatisfaction. It was at this critical moment that a man named Ali ibn Muhammad appeared on the scene. Some viewed him as the liberator of the oppressed, while others saw him as an opportunist exploiting the unrest for personal gain. Regardless of his true motivations, Ali ibn Muhammad became the catalyst for the Zanj rebellion. His origins are uncertain. Some claim he was of the same lineage as Ali ibn Abi Talib, considered by Shi'a Muslims to be the rightful caliph after the Prophet Muhammad. Others suggest he was of Persian descent. What is clear is that Ali gained prominence in 863 when he moved to Bahrain, a center of Shiite influence, where he claimed descent from Imam Ali. His popularity grew, and some even began to revere him as a prophet and king. However, his political aspirations ended when the Abbasids intervened, defeating his supporters in battle. Ali fled to Basra in southern Iraq, where he sought to exploit the local power struggle. Eventually, He started recruiting slaves to his cause, with the help of a black freeman named Suleiman ibn Jamie. One key recruit was Rayhan ibn Salih, an African slave and foreman in Basra. Ali promised Rayhan a leadership role in the rebellion, and the Zanj cause grew. The Zanj were inspired by a banner that read, "God has purchased the souls of believers and their property, for they have attained paradise fighting in the way of God." On September 9th, 869, the Zanj rebellion officially began as Ali ibn Muhammad and his followers began preaching to the slaves, calling them to join their struggle for freedom. Ali declared himself the savior of the Zanj, sent by Allah, and adopted the egalitarian beliefs of the Kharijite sect, which stated that anyone, even a slave, could rule if they were the most qualified. By the end of the year, 15,000 slaves and poor freemen had joined the revolt. Initially, the Abbasid Caliphate ignored the rebellion, distracted by internal strife and external threats. This gave the Zanj time to score early victories, despite their lack of weapons and armor. One report describes a Zanj rebel charging into battle with nothing but a plate, highlighting their determination and desperate circumstances. As the rebellion grew, so did their resources, and the Zanj began to acquire weapons, boats, and food. Ali ibn Muhammad commanded his forces through multiple interpreters, showing the multi-ethnic nature of the rebellion. The Zanj forces were a mix of black slaves from various African backgrounds, along with a smaller number of poor freemen, urban craftsmen, and peasants. One of the rebellion's greatest strengths was its guerrilla tactics, capitalizing on the Zanj's intimate knowledge of the marshlands. They preferred to strike smaller, isolated units rather than face the caliphate's full might. Despite their ethnic diversity, the Zanj forces were disciplined, and women even took part in some battles, helping to supply the fighters and throwing bricks at the enemy. After a series of early successes, the Zanj set their sights on Basra. Though their first attempt to capture the city failed, they built their own capital, Al-Mukhtar, southeast of Basra. Al-Mukhtar was a well-fortified city, surrounded by canals and protected by catapults, with a palace, mosque, prison, and market at its center. Within 2 years, the Zanj were minting their own currency for trade with Bedouin merchants. In 871, the Zanj captured Basra, resulting in a massacre of the city's inhabitants, though the exact number of casualties is debated. The Zanj continued to disrupt the caliphate by severing supply lines to Baghdad. By 873, they had taken Wazid, bringing them within 50 miles of the capital, forcing the Abbasids to turn their attention to the growing threat. In 880, Caliph al-Muwaffaq was sent to quash the rebellion, bringing a large army and a fleet to besiege al-Mukhtar. The blockade and subsequent starvation inside the city weakened the Zanj, and in 883, a final assault on the city led to its fall. Ali ibn Muhammad was executed, and the rebellion came to an end. Though the Zanj rebellion was ultimately crushed, its impact was significant. It marked the end of large-scale plantation slavery in the Arab world and contributed to the further decline of the Abbasid Caliphate. The devastation in southern Iraq led to a decline in agricultural production and a drop in tax revenues, weakening the empire's power. The rebellion highlighted the racial and social tensions within the caliphate and foreshadowed the eventual collapse of Abbasid rule. Stay tuned for more videos on Islamic history, and if you enjoy our content, consider subscribing and supporting us on Patreon or YouTube. Your support helps us continue to create educational content and bring you more in-depth historical stories.